Good afternoon. I know there's a few people still coming in, but I also know we have to clear the space for a 1 o'clock class. So I'm surprised. This is not the 18th budget forum, thankfully. But we thought there would be some updates, and I also want to, as I always do, leave some time for Q&A at the end. So it really is generic updates and things that either weren't discussed in depth at convocation, or maybe some new things since convocation. And to start it on a very upbeat note, not that I intend to go to a very down place, but to start an upbeat note, to really just talk about a couple of awards, several of which have been announced, but all in the last couple of weeks, I think, around which we should all be proud, and will certainly create our ability to, in some cases, to also continue many of the good work that we're already doing. So last month, but that was yesterday, right? when I think about that out loud. So very recently, you saw the announcement that we were, for now the second year in a row, given the Higher Education Excellence in Diversity Award, the HEED Award, from Diverse Issues in Higher Ed. Yes, for all of us. Extremely proud, and I will tell you that the work that goes into the application is, for me, the rewarding part, to see what is reflected of all of the initiatives, all of the activities across the campus, across divisions that go into the application, and then it is obviously rewarding to see that we are recognized for those multiple initiatives, that the ongoing effort and work. And then, for the first time in this campus's history, we received an HSI grant for $2.5 million. Yes. Actually, 2.6, excuse me. And when I say it's the first time in our history, many of you will remember that we established 2010 as the timeline we wanted to achieve HSI status. We actually achieved it earlier than that. We applied once before, only once before, had a highly rated grant, but didn't get funded. And then there was no funding and no grant RFPs put out. So this is wonderful. The grant is a PASOS grant, meaning Steps in Spanish, Pathways to Academic Success and Opportunities. A really wonderful grant that shows, again, the collaboration, particularly between student and academic affairs, in the outreach and the initiatives for certainly serving Latino students, but not only that, serving all of the diverse and educationally at-risk populations on our campus. So really wonderful. And Minerva, who may be here, and Marisol, who I know can't be here, deserve a lot of applause for shepherding that revised grant. Department of Education also awarded us, again, a 5-year renewal grant of over $1.4 million for our TRIO Student Support Services program, again aimed at first-generation, low-income students with disability backgrounds, with a goal of increasing their retention and graduation rates. So when you look at certainly those two awards, and the Governor's Award for Innovation, I might say, which is a little older in the announcement, it really both recognizes the work we've done and connects and aligns to the goals that we have set going forward. And just yesterday, I think it was, so I don't even think we put press on it, the nonprofit organization Educate to Career recently released its college rankings, which rates college on how well they prepare students for workforce by looking at job readiness, employability, earnings. We were ranked 13 among 1,182 universities. So when we talk about providing the background of education and skills in a specific discipline or profession, and we talk about the experiential learning, and we talk about understanding those skills that make students workforce ready, obviously this is a very dramatic indication that we are doing an excellent job and compared to 1,186 other institutions. But who's counting, right? So a lot of good news. As I said to you, this was not a forum about the budget, thankfully, but I do want to start with a little bit just about either budget update or a little bit more about the budget than I normally talk about or did talk about in convocation. What a lot of the press, and certainly even our own system, has said, and they are right, is at the end of the day, late in the session, the governor and both houses fully funded the CSU. What that means is they fully funded the request that came from our Board of Trustees to them. The last $58 million that they approved, the governor and with the support of both houses, was a surprise to everyone that it was approved that late in the session. It was for the full $216 million request by the CSU Board to the governor. What it does not mean is that we are fully funded to where we were in 2008 when we started into the 6-year recession, right? It just means that they fully funded the request. That additional $58 million was then at a very late stage, obviously in August, allocated out by the system to the campuses, to the 23 campuses, looking at both some new FTES, not for this year, but for next year, because finally our system gets that we can't in August, begin to add students for the fall, and some of it towards student success, toward the graduation initiatives. So it is good news. We got a lot of money out of that funding disproportionately and positively, both because of our demand for FTEs and already serving FTEs, a larger number of FTEs, and for student success. What the presidents were clear about in conversations was the system's need to report back to the legislature and the governor in October what we were doing with the student success money. And we said we cannot let the legislature think they can give us money in August and by October we have improved retention, time to graduation, what all of those things, because the legislature's probably naive about some of that. What we asked was the ability for each campus to talk about, in fact, how long and how many high-impact practices, how many initiatives have already been in place, for which this additional money now will help obviously strengthen and expand going forward. But it wasn't this money at this moment that helped change that. So we will submit that probably, I'm looking at Matt, today or tomorrow. Matt has been the one combining all of this. An incredibly good story that goes back, and most of you know this, goes back to at least 2006, and a real focus on our efforts pre the system's graduation initiative and certainly through it. So that was the new funding, and all of the conversation and the press about fully funding the budget was fully funding the Board of Trustees' request, not bringing us back to the level of funding that we had prior to the recession. Connected to that, I know, and I'm going to try to preempt at least one question, probably not many more, by saying, why are we then still growing if the state has not replaced all of that funds? One, certainly it is connected to our mission. We are the only CSU in this region, and I say that with great purpose and have said it publicly, the only CSU in our region serving this region as a public comprehensive university. San Diego State has gotten out of that market. They now only 17% of their incoming freshmen come from in-region. So one, it has been our mission. It has been our mission to serve educationally at-risk students. We are obviously high demand. We've become a first choice institution. The additional money with additional FTES that was not directed this year, we will use next year to not grow and have then even greater amounts of fully funded FTES on campus. The other thing, and I know you've heard me say this in the other budget forums, but not growing with FTES, because that is still a predominant way that CSUs are funded. A little bit for student success now, but mostly FTES, is by not growing does not mean that we stay steady. What it means is we still have to pay all of the mandatory health benefits costs, all of the increased utilities costs, and of course with a growing campus, as much as we do to be sustainable as we build new buildings, we have those costs. So to really not grow is where some of our sister institutions are, is to begin to figure out how to continue to cut. Employees cut in other operational ways. But primarily it is to talk about the fact of the high demand, the need in this region, and our path to our master plan growth. We have had a good budget year. We have gotten, obviously, more money to fund FTES, and some that will go and help us continue to broaden and expand the student success, as will the previously referenced HSI and Governor's Innovation Award and the TRIO SSS. All of them help us with additional funds to do what it is we have committed ourselves to doing in terms of not just recruiting, but retaining and graduating students. Our hope, the system hope, is that we continue to get the legislature to continue to fully fund the Board of Trustees' request. The Board of Trustees will finalize and approve their budget request to the governor, as they always do, next month at the November Board of Trustees meeting, so that he has it before he reduces his first mid-year budget plan. There's hope because they heard the message last year, and what all of you know is last year, faculty, staff, students, administrators, we all had the same messages of the absolute essential nature of fully funding the CSU. So that takes us quickly to our budget. And as I said, we did get, because of the growth and because of student success, a fair amount of new funds. So our budget grew from last fiscal year to this fiscal year by $13 million. Includes general fund allocation, more tuition revenue due to enrollment increases, revenues from the Academic Excellence Student Success Fee that students pay. When you take that $13 million and you subtract the mandatory costs that I mentioned before, we had about $12 million available for allocation this fiscal year. And that's a whole lot more than we've had for a lot of years. What we know is we have a University Budget Council process that, without knowing what we're going to get and without allocating specific dollars to it, looks at all of the requests that come from all of the divisions and move up, and then they send to me in order of what they feel is priority related to our mission and values, what should be funded. And so what I want to say to you is the good news is when the last $58 million came into the system and then was allocated out, I was able to approve funding all of the high categories and all but 2 of the medium categories from the UBC list, going right down the line and very much in alignment with what we've been talking about. Certainly instructional support, student services report, and then a variety of others. So of the $12 million that we had to allocate, a little over $6 million went to academic affairs. And it went obviously for instructional purposes. Full-time faculty hires, additional sections and part-time lecturers, funding laboratory initiatives, and a little bit to move successfully, as we know we will, through our WASC accreditation process. Also, one of the things that the Chancellor is certainly interested in, and we have had our eye on, and I'm now going to point to Graham with, and not to lay blame, but to give praise, that we have really been working to build back up the ranks of tenure and tenure-track faculty. And so we have added 49 new tenure-track faculty positions, 32 new student service professionals. Those numbers include replacements, but they are still strong numbers over the past 2 years alone. And we have, in consultation, grown, as you know, the Senate has approved, and we've grown some academic programs. Given our increase in full-time equivalent faculty and our current enrollment pattern, we expect this year to have a student-faculty ratio of about 25 to 1. We'll know the final ratio, obviously, after our census, but we think that that's where we will end, probably a little bit higher than several years ago, but certainly within the low end of where our sister institutions are in terms of faculty-student ratio. The most important part of this year relative to WASC is that we have now submitted our report. Thank you, Regina. And they will now be doing their review and have consultation with Regina on their perspectives on us in advance of their March visit to our campus. I know there's a clock countdown. I saw that, I think, yesterday. So I'm sure we'll all keep ourselves aware of the March 16th to 18th deadline, timeline for the WASC review. Back to the budget, $1.6 million went to student affairs for increased services, additional staff to serve our students, particularly the underrepresented students, additional staff to comply with the new and increasing Title IX and CSU system requirements, and funding to staff our new Latino Center. $1 million also went to academic affairs to fund the faculty equity program to address, I think, that did a good job in addressing a lot of the years of inversion and compression for faculty. So after all of those allocations, we had less than $4 million available for everything else, including a little bit of funds to put in a reserve. So a little under $1 million went to finance and administrative services for new staff to support labs, new police officers, supporting infrastructure in areas like procurement and the budget office, as well as a program to bring veterans into trade apprenticeships. A little under $1 million went to university advancement to fund the comprehensive campaign, a phone-a-thon program as part of that campaign and ongoing fundraising, and the events and conferencing services operations, which you might recall during the recession, we moved events and conference servicing to self-support, which was a bad idea and unreasonable to ask that we would actually have events and conference servicing, which supports so many of our internal events, self-supporting. So we moved that back into stateside. If you didn't view the videos about the campaign launch, that was just about a week ago on Sunday the 20th, maybe a little more than a week ago, in which we invited a lot of our already existing donors and hope to be soon new donors to the excitement of the campaign. It's a $50 million goal, and we have raised $26 million already to date, which is what you do in a silent phase of the campaign. For all the years you were asking me what was the goal and when was I going to tell you. Now you know, and we are moving rapidly forward. There's about $500,000 to the Office of the President, primarily to fund the university's business intelligence and data warehouse initiative, which includes new technology to make data readily available for decision support across the campus. About $500,000 to community engagement to fund our student placement program, a field trip coordinator for our outreach efforts to our local partner school districts, and to support the infrastructure for community engagement, which now, as you probably know, includes service learning, student placement, and our Alliance for Higher Education, which covers the 10 public school districts, which left about $300,000 for us to put in reserves. And I would say to you that is really little, and we have been living on the edge by getting through a recession by really using all of the reserves we had. And it was something that in my conversation with the chancellor, I acknowledged that we knew, I acknowledged we had done it purposively, and I committed that we would at least start building up that reserve, because when there is a catastrophe and an unexpected occurrence, you do need to have some money in reserve. Separately, the new AESS fee, the Academic Excellence Student Support Fees, available for allocation this year was $1.5 million to support the three priorities that we had in all of the consultation prior to the fee consultation, adding sections for high demand courses, expanding library hours and resources, increasing student academic support. So obviously 1.5 million is a lot of money, but it's not that much when you start looking at adding the sections and some of the other library and student support services. I want to talk a minute about strengthening the core, because I talked at Convocation about no new initiatives. Obviously I lied, because the campaign is a big new initiative. But saying that we really as a campus needed to probably not go out of our way to find the next big initiative for a year or two, because we really have to strengthen some of the infrastructure on our campus that has not for years gotten additional allocation. When we have begun to have some money, we appropriately invested that money in instructional support, instruction and in student support services. Where we didn't invest it is, for example, in facilities, in the budget or procurement offices, in the very places that also have been stretched and stressed over the years, obviously serving more employees and more students. So we are taking an internal look at some of those core infrastructures, talking about both no new initiatives and trying to identify where we need some funds to assure that obviously all of the jobs all of you do get supported by those essential, if you will, back of the house aspects, whether it's human resources, facilities maintenance, data infrastructure, and looking at our auxiliaries. So our rapid growth has put strains there, and I think we are at a place where if we don't attend to them, you all are going to feel those strains more and more each day. So that's really what we meant, and I say we because it was the Vice President and I that said we really need to pause, and we need to make sure that we don't fail to support faculty, staff, students, because we aren't paying attention to those core infrastructure. So while we certainly wouldn't step away from a new initiative or a partnership that makes sense to us, we really think we have our hands quite full with 14,000 students, a lot of big initiatives already in place, and some of them are part of the campaign pillars as well. But I think focusing on the core for this year and taking an objective look at where we really need to provide more positions, enhance technology, provide other support is timely. This year we also, as you know, I have just charged a diversity strategic planning task force to work with our Chief Diversity Officer, Arturo Campo, and our consultant who we've hired to look at the diversity plan we have. And that diversity plan is now several years old. Really was a plan that helped get us an office and staffing and move us forward. And we really now need to look at what are all the activities going on, how do they fit strategically, what might be the measures of our success going forward in diversity. What we also decided was, with all of the diversity mapping recommendations that had come through last year's wonderful work, to not forget those, but to have them be looked at in parallel fashion by the Diversity Strategic Planning Group to see how obviously those recommendations dovetail with what we believe high order priorities should be in this revised or Diversity Strategic Plan 2.0. Hopefully a lot of that work will be done this fall so that in the spring we can have widespread campus vetting through a variety of forums to have input so that somewhere before or by April of next year we would have had the input to adopt the second strategic plan that will help us focus our activities and see where we need resources, human, fiscal, technological, to move that plan forward. I mentioned a consultant. We have a consultant, Dr. Bernardo Ferdman, who comes with decades of work in this area, a board-certified coach, a university professor, a native Spanish speaker, also the editor of Diversity at Work, The Practice of Inclusion. And so we also he had both a very full conversation with the Executive Council and then met all afternoon last Monday, last Monday afternoon, with our diversity strategic planning group. Quickly, just to remind you, because I've said this in several other places, I care deeply about this campus and about all of the constituent groups. The caveat that I continue to say to you is with system seniority comes many privileges. I might call it something else. But I am now the third senior president in this system. I'm the senior female president in the system, and by June I will be the senior president in the system. And that's a good thing for Cal State San Marcos? Well, yes. I'm glad you're still happy about that, by the way. But it does come with enhanced and increased expectations of the system for leadership. So I find myself on many more task forces, chairing some other initiatives. And what I continue to say to you, if you don't see me all of the places you have always seen me, it isn't because I don't care, or it isn't because I am putting my feet up in my office, much as that would be welcome. It is that and the campaign. The campaign will continue to take a fair amount of my time as a president, because in fact, a lot of the big asks, it is the position of the president that it takes to get a high donor's attention and gift. So in advance, if I am not where you wished I would be when you invited me or where I normally am, assume good intention and assume I'm doing one of those other important things on behalf of Cal State San Marcos. Mentioned the campaign. What I said at the campaign launch is, and maybe you need to hear it, we are the only CSU that has been audacious enough to launch a campaign at 25 years old. To our knowledge, and I'm looking now at Neil, we may be the only one in the nation at 25 years old audacious enough to launch a campaign. And while 50 million might not sound a lot when San Diego State exceeded their 360 million by 100 and some million, and while there are $1 billion campaigns nationally, for us, the dollar amount is important, and I am certain achievable, but it also is a continued way to enhance the credibility, the visibility, the reputation of this institution, because campaigns are filled with stories of our past success and stories of what and why we need philanthropic support for the work we do and the populations we serve. And so why did we decide in 2012 to start the silent phase of a campaign, sort of still in the end of a recession, and without anywhere in the system to look for advice? I would also say to you there are very few CSUs that have actually launched and finished campaigns in the entire system, even as old as many of our sister institutions are. So this is both novel, audacious, and important, and needs to happen now. You've heard the themes. It's preparing tomorrow's leaders. It's building great communities. It's solving critical issues. And when I say those three things, every one of you in this room is connected to at least one of, if not more, of those themes. It is who we are. It is what we have been doing for a long time. You heard me say we're already over half of our way to that $50 million goal, which is usually while you wait to announce the public phase, to at least have some of that in the bank, and we do. We had the best year last year, more than doubled what the system expects us to raise by raising over $10 million just last year alone. So our stories are compelling because the work you do is important. The students that we recruit, the students that we graduate, the research work that our faculty does, the work we do in community partnerships are such compelling stories that together we will, I am certain, meet and exceed that campaign goal. So I think this is going to be, with no new initiatives, a filled year with our WASC accreditation, with, I didn't mention, obviously a second year into candidacy of NCAA, with our sports center, which will have a ribbon cutting sometime next summer, with these new grants that have given us the additional funding to do some of the work we do with more people and learn from those high impact practices and spread them. So there'll be excitement, there'll be continued, certainly continued conversations about how we continue to tell the legislature what we have done well with their funding and why the CSU needs more funds. And I will say to you, I will continue, and I know you will continue, to make sure that the system knows that we are a good investment for the system. We had a trustee on campus yesterday and last evening at my house, and he's from San Diego, Trustee Adam Day, and he is clear that we are the CSU in his region. He's clear about the importance of San Diego State, but it's not as a public, regional, comprehensive institution serving educationally at risk and diverse student populations. And I said to him, and I hope you go away knowing that CSUSM is the jewel of the system. And he smiled and he says, I never tell my kids which are favorite, but yes. So on that good note, let me say that was really my planned updates, and probably some of you are here because you'd like to hear about something else. So this is a time for questions, comments about either something I mentioned or if I didn't mention something you want to ask or talk about. Yes?
Yeah, so you alluded to the fact that you are a very key character in the CSU system, soon to be the president system, and obviously a key component to representing our campus here at San Marcos. So I know that there's a lot of issues going around right now, especially with faculty rights and pay. So is that something that you personally take on, having a leverage to our system to advocate for those faculty rights?
Two parts of that question. So one is not politically, because in fact bargaining is left at the bargaining table, and in fact not just with faculty, with any of the unions, presidents stay out of that because literally it's the system that bargains and bargains with the union. On the other side of it, I said two, there's probably a third. So one is no, because I know where I have to stay, which is not to insert myself into the bargaining process. Second is to say, with the lens of this campus, is to know that we finally are coming a long way in trying to get salaries across the board, faculty, staff, salaries, increased to where they should be, and in 6 years is hard to overcome that, to say, I know that there's still room to move that forward. The third, which is sort of the interesting piece in my mind in terms of the faculty salary piece, is you all may remember that faculty equity increases were then left to campuses to do something with or not. Our campus, and this is, again, thanks to Graham and Bob Ryder in particular, I think our campus not only spent $1 million, but did a very deep analytical look at faculty salaries by discipline, by rank, by time and rank, to really try to assure that we were literally dealing with inversion and compression in that equity. And I think I saw the data several times as it moved forward. So the other problem is, at the system level, they're trying to deal with a system issue when campuses really, some of them did better. I think ours did a lot better at reducing some of those gaps than other campuses, some of which put no money in, and some of which actually put a percentage increase across the board, which does not deal with compression or inversion. So all of those are part of it when presidents are asked to weigh in, and they sometimes are as a collective. We do talk about the fact that this needs to continue to be a part of a system budget to ask the legislature to continue to fund compensation increases. The last piece is to say to you, on the other hand, the hard part of that conversation about any other increases is the Board of Trustees budget that was sent to the governor in November of 2014 said 2% increase for all employees. And that was what was funded. So to try to find more than that for significant groups, when you've allocated it, as I've just said to you, out already, is where the crunch is. It's trying to figure out where would that money come from. If, it may be, you could have disagreements about whether the percent is accurate or not. You could have disagreements about whether it should be the same across campuses, given we really did something much better, I think, than other campuses. And the third is, where is the money in this budget? The system has to, and I think all the presidents know that, I certainly do, the system has to continue to include a significant line item for compensation increases going forward and make the collective argument that all of us have been doing, that 6 years lost can't be made up in any one year. Yeah. So the funding for example, the consultant this year was already set aside in the budget last year. I don't know what it's going to cost, because that's the whole point of the plan, is to see what those actions are, and hopefully to have enough of the guesstimate of is what it's going to cost that it might be able to also, I would hope, be put in a placeholder, even as it's being vetted. I would hope in the spring we could have some guesstimates, so it would be a placeholder for UBC to look at. Should we then fund whatever that cost is to support the diversity strategic plan? I can't tell you how much is going to be resourced. I'm sure there will be resources necessary, but part of it is, what you all know, is there's so much that we do across this campus in diversity and inclusion work. Part of it is capturing it. Part of it is understanding where the responsibility is for that work, because it isn't all the chief diversity officer's work to do it, right? It is that we need to know as a campus what that work is, how it's prioritized, and whether now we begin to put some timelines and other metrics in that. So for example, we have had our eye on, and many of the faculty know this, we've had our eye on for the last several years when it came to faculty hiring, to assure that the chairs of each faculty committee and the deans of all of the colleges understood the importance of improving outreach to diverse faculty populations, and we've had a great deal of success in the last 2 years of hiring faculty, that we have gotten then a greater and diverse pool. That now we can start saying, do we have goals related to that? Do we have goals, numerical goals related to staff hiring? That may not cost us more money, but it begins to set some other expectations. So multiple answers to your questions. Hard to guess what that plan is going to come out with as the next level of activity. I would hope there's enough that would give us a way to put a placeholder in, so UBC could be looking at that and thinking about how high a priority that should be to fund in the next year. And some of it may be operational and or one-time dollars, and some of it might be positions and permanent funding. Okay? Yeah.
So thank you for, first of all the good news.
You're welcome, Ed.
So my question is about sustainability, and from my perspective in the College of Science and Math. So we do, I think, a lot of really great stuff there. Some of which you mentioned: undergraduate research, hands-on curriculum that prepares our students for careers through experiential learning. We have innovative programs and curricula. We secure external funding. We do outreach to community service learning. So a lot of great stuff. Apparently the word's gotten out on that, because since 2010, the number of majors in our college has increased by 250%.
They see your reward for doing all that good work.
Well, right. So much of that work relies on tenure track faculty. We have many wonderful lecturers, but a lot of the things that I mentioned and that you mentioned have tenure track faculty behind them. So the number of tenure track faculty in our college has grown by 20% over that period, compared to 250% growth in the number of majors. And so the questions about sustainability we're grappling with in the college: how do we sustain these high impact practices, these positive things we've been able to achieve when we have fewer and fewer tenure track faculty per major in college?
Well, and I think a lot of people want to want to hear an answer to that. So, one, yes, to applaud what you've done, and yes, obviously, in the sciences, we've seen, in not just physics, but obviously seen probably unexpected and unprecedented growth. And I know we have disproportionate, now, this year in particular, allocation and SFRs in several areas. Provost and I have had a little bit of conversation about that going forward. Obviously, with the funding this year, and hopefully the proposed funding additions for next year, the academic excellence fee supports tenure-track faculty, not just adjunct faculty, that we are going to need to look at how now we continue, and I'm looking now at Graham, continue to modify a formula that says how do we predict and deal with those, particularly those disciplines which have seen the growth. Can we predict the continued growth, and how do we then allocate? There's always going to be a finite amount of dollars, but how do we then try to how do we try to either change a model to assure that we can do that? I would say to you the other thing that's not unimportant here, and while campaigns don't generally fund permanent faculty positions, they can take the operational dollars that would be spent coming from the state, for example, and some philanthropy can, and we've seen that in some places in the sciences already. I know it is a real problem. I know it is differentially impacting some of the disciplines, particularly in the science area. The provost is well aware, and the vice provost, I'm looking at Camille, well aware of this, trying to figure out how we now look at it going forward, and what, if anything, we continue to do to try to not have all of that growth be only supported by part-time faculty, because we are trying to make strides in changing that ratio of tenure and tenure-track faculty to part-time, because we obviously lost a lot of ground, as did everybody else, during 6 years of no growth and very few hires. Yes?
Excuse me. It was brought to my attention that, I guess, as students were paying $2 for the student success fee. I'm all for the success of the students. I think you said $1.5 million was allocated.
Yeah.
If we had 14,
Was collected.
Collected. Sorry. If we had 14,000 students paying $200 each, there is a $1.3 million remaining of that. I guess I was kind of curious where that's being allocated.
All right. So you did the math that I didn't. You
1.5 million.
Thank you. Okay, so 1.5 million, if I didn't say new, thank you, in the new. So we have a lot of it already allocated now, and per our agreement with students as we went through the process, about 60% of all of those funds go for instructional support. So they go to either fund part-time lecturers, or some of the funds, not the ongoing funds from a year or so ago, have gone for tenure-track hires in disciplines. So out of the 60%, the other was library services, expanding hours and support, and student support services. And we have had not only a number of new hires in the student affairs area, but I'm looking for Lorena now, a number, right in front of me. We have a number of searches going on right now to expand student service support. So the 1.5 was the new money on the ongoing collection. So you're right. Your numbers were right. I may have misspoke if I didn't say new money. Does that help? Okay. Thank you. All right, let me go right behind.
Hi.
Hi.
Anisha. I'm a third year here. So my question for you would be, what are the goals for Black students here on this campus? Because a lot of us feel like we don't have a voice, like you're skipping over us. And also,
Didn't hear the last part.
yeah, and also we feel like we don't have a space to voice our opinions. I'm in the Black Student Union as well as the vice president, and that's the only place where I can see my fellow brothers and sisters. So let us know what we
This is more black people than I've seen all week.
As an African-American student, I hear that story far too well. As an advocate for the DSU, I'm always on campus. Every single African-American student that I have not gotten to or that I have not seen, I'm pulling them out to DSU, which is stands for Black Student Union. And I hear the same story that I preached. I didn't know there was black students on my campus. And then now, DSU, being such like, we were actually received Order of the Year last year. And yet we're still not being heard and we're still not being seen. We're fading behind. And so I would love if we did have a center where African American students can come out and can be a part of it, and that they can see and say, hey, I know I could go there. DSU is constantly growing. I come to the meetings and we don't even have enough seats. We're pulling seats into our meetings because we want everyone to be able to have a seat and be able to come accommodate and be a part of it. And so for us to have a center would be amazing. So I stand for all of that.
Not against it, right? Okay. I appreciate your voice, and if you have felt, I'm losing my voice, if you have felt unseen or unheard, I am sorry for that. Some of you know that the history of centers on this campus, which precedes me, have been evolutionary, have been always come from student voices. The centers that were here before I got here, whether it was the Pride Center or the Multicultural Center, came from student voices. Obviously, the Latino Center recently from student voices who came forward, and then I charged a group to say not only what is the need, because the need may be clear, but then there's not only space, there's staffing, right? I mean, so the whole point, which is what we did with the Latino Center. So I believe you've probably raised this in a couple of other places. I have not heard it this clearly through all of those channels. I can now, I would have actually like you to specifically, in a request to me, ask me for this so that I can charge a group to, with you, explore what the options, the space, the cost would be, which is what the whole process we just did for the Latino Center. With that, does that work for you? Okay. Okay. I'll wait to hear from you. Right? Okay. Good. Yes, way in the back.
Yeah, I had a question. I heard you talk kind of at length about the equity program for faculty. I haven't heard you talk about an equity program for staff at the local level.
No, I haven't. You're right. You haven't heard it because I haven't mentioned it. We obviously talked about the faculty equity because that was so clearly, after the bargaining with the CFA, clearly put to the presidents that if there was going to be faculty equity, the presidents had to own that. We wanted to also get through and find out what money we had, which was in August before we found the last piece of money. Vice President Hawk and I, and in fact the Executive Council, have talked about how we go about now looking at and setting aside money for staff equity. There obviously have been, I shouldn't say isolated, that doesn't sound right. I mean, some staff have gotten equity adjustments either from supervisors directly. There have been in-range progressions, but we are now looking at the money it will take and looking at staff. I have, in fact, a big spreadsheet from Linda Hawk in my pile of things to look at to say, how do we go about looking at staff in the same way we looked at faculty, that looks at position and compares it, that looks at length of service in position, et cetera. So you haven't heard me talk about it, but I'm saying it now, and we are going to do that analysis within the next month or so. Mike, are you going to say thank you?
What's that?
Mike, are you going to say thank you?
Equity program.
Okay, I wanted that on the record.
They have an initiative for a living wage for all employees. At San Francisco, a $15 minimum wage.
Oath.
There are other campuses that are giving money for staff, so
I
Put that
should,
out there, we're waiting to hear what we
you are right, and Linda's going to shoot me because my first talking point should have been that where we will start is that living wage, and that will be the first equity adjustment we make on this campus.
Yeah.
Yes. Sorry, Linda. Well, I'm glad you asked me. That should have been my first point, Mike.
Why here?
Where did the hand go? Oh, yes.
I want to ask a question regarding sexual assault on campus. As we know, for quite a few years now, in the news report, we tend to have one, I think the highest number for a while was 3 sexual assault reported, and we had 0 consecutive years. And this year, when the news report was released, we saw there was 10
Yeah.
sexual assaults reported. It's kind of crazy because some people might think, oh my gosh, we have 10 times an increase in sexual assault that's happening on campus, right? But other people who study this and know that rate happens consistently, we experienced that 1 in 5 college students in the academic year. I was curious, do you think that perhaps because of the new laws that came from the White House and in terms of how we're reporting what services we have on campus now, and the efforts that a lot of students have done, do you think there's a culture now where people are able to feel more comfortable reporting, and it would identify why there was a drastic increase in the number of reporting? And if so, I was curious if there was at all concerns about the ways in which we were getting those reports recorded in years prior to this one. Because as a student for myself, I found it very concerning. I know I only heard of 4 assaults that happened last year. I was shocked there was 10. And I mean, we're students on this campus. We should feel safe. We should know what exactly is going on. I mean, that's what a Dean Career Report came to be, right?
Right.
So I was just curious if you could kind of speak to that, and then speak to what you promised to do on this campus in terms of making sure that we have a space, even possibly a center that focuses on sexual violence and for women.
Thank you. So, and I don't want to be overly simplistic in what is a profound and complex issue, but as a professional social worker by background, there was similarity when the federal government first introduced the mandatory child abuse reporting laws. It wasn't that abuse increased, it was that people had places and spaces to go to report it, and hopefully good processes and trained people to do those investigations. So one, I am not certain whether the data means there are more assaults or whether it means people feel more comfortable with a place to report, are clearer about the definition of assault and the seriousness that this campus takes that. I am hoping that that is part of the reason. I would be, in the sense of wanting people to feel safe, feel that there is a place and a process and professionals to address it. I would be not uncomfortable to see it go up even more than numbers if what it meant is people were reporting and feeling safe. What we've already done, as you know, is we have created a full-time position as a Title IX coordinator, and Bridget is still alive and well to talk about that. But, I mean, she was doing both jobs, and then the job really became clearly full-time. Clearly, we now have a sexual assault advocate.
Yes.
Okay, Krista. So we also, following best practices, said we also want an advocate here. We obviously have processes and additional staff we bring in when necessary because the investigations can are labor intensive if they're done well and thoroughly. So what I hope through all of that, one, it shows that we're serious about it. Two, that it suggests that we care a lot about campus safety for students and everybody, and that we also have been for a long time, and I know we are now looking at engaging and doing even more, really trying to educate more widely what represents sexual assault, what are really behaviors that we find unacceptable on this campus and should as a nation, and that's what the federal legislation is saying. So I'm not sure I would define it as our campus is less safe. What I hope the data is saying to me is that we are providing places and safe spaces for people to come forward so that they feel safer, and that we're educating more and more people about how unacceptable sexual assault is on our campus. They're going to kick us out? They're going to kick us out probably. Is there any other question? Sorry? Oh, sorry. Last question, yes.
Thanks for having this forum. You know, when the University Student Union was being built, I kept walking by this sign, and it said the California State University Corporation. And now that athletics center is being built, the same sign is there. It says the California State University San Marcos Corporation. So I'm kind of wondering, are you the president of the corporation?
It's probably a very good question. The reason we have a university corporation is we have other auxiliaries. So we have four auxiliaries, right, on our campus. So we create auxiliaries like the university corporation so that they can both collect funds and manage funds that are stay separate from all of the state funding and the allocation we just talked about. And the University Corporation is exactly that, to deal with not housing projects, facility construction projects. So they are the vehicle as part of the CSU. So yes, do I oversee that? Absolutely. Is it separate from us? No. It's like the UARS, the University Auxiliary Research and, God, I never get that right. You know, UARS, that easy acronym. So it's like UARS, which is a separate auxiliary that manages and collects and manages all of the commercial operations funding. UCOR does it for the facilities end of it. So it is part of us. It is overseen by the Vice President of Finance and I in terms of everything they do, but it's kept separate per the CSU policies for how we do business. Thank you all.